Welcome to the Emerging Market Retail Podcast. My name is Rafael Escamilla.
Hey there, my name is Camilo Mora.
And today we're having our first full episode where we're going to be talking about how to serve 1.4 billion consumers. Camilo, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about like the largest emerging market in the world, right? So this is, of course, our first episode of the Emerging Market Retail Podcast. So, of course, India is
we had to
the
start
most
big, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just for our audience to have a better understanding of the size of this market, this is just like adding, the population of Europe and Latin America both together and serving them. So for today's episode, we have invited a very special guest, the VP of Supply Chain in HUL India. And I am very intrigued, in order to discuss with him these distribution strategies, how they are making this possible, how they are serving these numerous amount of shops in India.
Yeah, that's indeed what I find extremely interesting about India, right? So if you think about the size of it, essentially 95% of the grocery retail landscape within India is formed by this network of nanostores, right? That's probably as large as it gets throughout the world, right? So you talk about population wise, China is kind of similar size to India, but in terms of the number of stores, right? And the challenges in serving consumers through these stores is just unparalleled, right? And I think what also makes this super interesting is that you see some very interesting digitization trends within India, with, for instance, the entrance of Facebook, who has announced a huge investment and a partnership with Reliance. They're forming GeoMart with the goal of providing a variety of services through these Kirana stores, these nano stores in India. You see mobile money, Paytm, Google Pay. You see Amazon, delivering e-commerce packages through the nano stores. So I think this all makes for a very interesting environment where you also see, still under development in terms of infrastructure. You see many challenges, informality, and other challenges that make this really a super interesting scope to analyze this this setting.
Very well. So why don't we discuss all of these challenges with an expert, Rafa? Hi, and welcome back to the Emerging Market Retail Podcast. Today, we have with us Willem Uijen. He's Executive Director of Supply Chain at Hindustan Unilever Limited in India. Welcome, Willem.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Willem, what are the different channels that you sell your products in India, and how does Unilever search each one of these channels?
Yeah, so the market in India still for a large part is what we call the general trade. So the what you would know as the mom and pop stores, or the Kirana stores, as they're called here. But we also see new channels coming up quickly. So if you look at the modern trade, more the supermarkets, or even the larger type of hypermarkets are up and coming here as well. You have obviously e-com, which is growing very quickly in India, so an important channel for us as well. Cash and carry, which from other markets for sure as well, is an important channel. Yeah, and then it comes down to the smaller channels, the pharmacy channels, and so on after that. But by far still, and growing for the last years, and also expected for the years to come, still the lion's share of the trade is being done through the general trade.
Thank you, Willem. So I would like to ask, actually, if you could provide some numbers for us to visualize what the size of the market is. How many stores do you serve? How much volume do you sell in each one of these channels?
Yes. So if you look at HUL or Hindustan Unilever in India, it's a business just a little under 6 billion euros. We have a reach in total of more than 8 million stores where our products are sold, and some 2 million of those are being served directly.
Wow. And how does this challenging landscape influence your strategy in terms of assortment, financial management, and operational schemes, for instance, with respect to other developing countries?
Yeah, if you look then at how the trade is being served, from the numbers that I just quoted, you already see that part of the stores are being served directly. And part of the trade is being served indirectly. Indirectly is usually through the wholesale channel or the cash and carry channel that reach a large number of stores where either the shop owners go and buy from multiple brands or multiple sellers directly. And there is a large part, as I mentioned before, these are the larger stores as well that are being served directly, where we have, as well as other FMCG companies that operate here in India at a different scale then, but have distributors in place to serve these stores directly. Now, if you see at where the majority of these stores sit, then a large part is in the metro cities. So in the largest cities in India, there are about 8 cities of more than 4 million people, where you see as well that the majority of outlets, not just for Hindustan Unilever, but also for the rest of the FMCG industry, is being covered directly. Then you have a large number of what I would call the tier 1 cities, so cities that are 1 million and above people. And there you have over 50 of those cities in India, where you still have good coverage because of the density of population, and therefore the efficiency that a distributor can have for serving stores directly. The tier 2 cities of between 500,000 and 1 million are also about 50 cities in India. There you see the coverage already dropping. And then you get into the rural area where the distribution becomes more spread, more difficult to do directly. Although we still have a good number of stores that we're serving directly there as well. You asked about the challenges in the channels. If I focus it for a moment, as you were asking about the nano stores specifically, then assortment is definitely key. So you see that the development of that channel in terms of carrying an ever more extensive assortment is something that has evolved drastically over the last years. And traditionally, you could see the smaller stores having a very limited assortment with really only the highest selling SKUs, such to say, in a specific category being stored there. But you see today that assortment has expanded quite drastically already. And that is obviously putting as well specific challenges to the distribution to make sure that with a relatively low cash investment that you have in a store for inventory holding, you can still have for that full assortment good service. Therefore, I would say, apart from service, the second point that is extremely important for the trade there is the delivery service. You need that responsiveness. Think of next day delivery to be able to manage, and that complexity of assortment, plus the management of working capital, which is important, obviously, for the store as well. Now, if I then think about that working capital, for these stores in particular, the credit facilities that a distributor or a partner who sells to the store has available is extremely important, because otherwise the working capital management or just the cash flows for the store become impossible to manage. And if you want to sell competitively in that channel, then credit facilities are absolutely essential. So that access to easy credit to be able to grow the business further is very important. And then lastly, I think also on returns, because with that ever more complex assortment, you see as well innovations, a lot of innovations coming into the Kirana stores. And those innovations are not always successful. Now, if that stays then with the shop owner, it becomes very difficult to actually launch the innovations there in the store, because the appetite for risk to take that for the inventory holding and being stuck at the end with some product that can't be sold, that's a difficult risk to take, of course, for the store. So therefore, the ability to do returns, to prevent losses for these businesses, as well as for a company like ours that you can redistribute the product that is good, is extremely important. So that return supply chain, having that up and running reliably for returns, that working capital can be unlocked quickly, is another very important one. And I think what all of these have in common, and where the efficiency is being very much driven today, is in the digitization of each and every one of those pillars. So if I think about digitization of assortment, you should be thinking of what are the type of SKUs, the kind of products that in the area or in the specific city where that store operates. And this can go down as small as the specific neighborhood where the store operates. The digital tools and the use of big data, the insights that we can get today about what is the right assortment, makes that easier than ever before. If you think about the delivery of service, where traditionally you would go from, let's say, a factory into a distribution center to a distributor, from that distributor into the stores, where right now you have the possibilities to actually go directly from a distribution center or even from a factory directly to a store. It allows you to service the stores a lot quicker, but you can just imagine the amount of data that needs to be managed then at a factory or at the distribution center level, and also the management of, let's say, simple things as eaches, individual items instead of cases. That is only possible if these operations are digitized as well. I think the same for credit. So if you think about the digitization of credit, it allows you to grant credit more reliably, and also bring that up to a level where a store can grow even more competitively or more if they have a reliable management of credit. And for returns, the same thing. Digitization in the area of returns allows us to do that much more efficiently, effectively than we were ever able to do that before. So the common thread for all of these, but I'm saying that now from the point of view of the FMCG industry, is really the digitization of each of these processes. But if you look at the store operations itself, to give you an example, in the urban areas, the mom and pop stores or the Kirana stores typically would be selling over 50% of their sales, not directly by people coming into the store anymore, but through a, let's say, digital type of setup where the customers sitting at their homes would order their favorite basket directly, and the store would bring that to your home directly. And that can be done either through WhatsApp or through telephone line or through email or the multiple ways, or an app specifically that the store has. Multiple ways possible there, but it's amazing to see that in the urban areas you have over 50% of the store sales already being home delivered, and where the orders are being taken through any of the means that I just mentioned.
Thank you. Yes, I was actually going to ask you, you talk now a lot about digitization, and there has been a lot of interest recently because both Amazon and Facebook have made significant investment in this setting. And there's also the presence of Reliance, which is, of course, a strong player that has now partnered with Facebook. We see many interesting things going on in India, where data access is relatively cheap with respect to other emerging markets. So how do you see those trends? There's also the entrance of mobile money more and more. How do you see those trends shaping up the future of the grocery retail landscape in India?
Yeah, I think the adaptation of any digital technology in India, with the examples of what you just gave, with, for example, reliance with the work that's being done on B2B, or you mentioned Amazon as well, that has the B2B business there directly. Flipkart has this as well. So you see several players coming up in that space. And that is also because the market that you have in India is an ever-growing or very fast-growing market. So there is space for new players to come in as well. I think what you see there is that there's definitely a good part of new players coming up, very much in the digital space. But you see on the other hand that the, let's say, incumbent players or the more traditional players in the market are digitizing their operations very quickly as well. The reasons for that is yes, absolutely right, that the cost of data in India is relatively cheap, and that makes it even for the businesses that are running with relatively low margins or operations such as distributors or stores or the FMCG industry in itself, which compared to some other industries are running with a different type of margin profile, does make that kind of technology accessible. I think secondly, the computing power that is available today with the amount of data that you need, if you look at SKU store level, I spoke about more than 8 million stores in the whole of India, and then you look at the assortment that the stores carry. If you want to translate that into a type of data management that needs to be done, you need some really strong computational power. And I think with everything that's coming up in cloud computing, you suddenly see that the type of forecasting models or inventory management models at a specific distributor level or store level for large companies or large portfolios become possible for the whole of India, something that you go back a few years ago, technologically that would have been possible to do, but financially it wouldn't have made sense. The cost for the use of that technology has come down so quickly that the use of that technology becomes available for these type of applications where it was just not affordable before. I think as well, you see that the willingness of these nanostores that you're talking about to make the transition into the digital space, because you might not consider them directly as the first partners of choice for digital, but the ability that they have to change their operations through the use of digital tools is actually quite amazing to see. The willingness to do that, to compete better in the market, is extremely strong. So we see the adaptation of new technology with, for example, digital ordering of the goods that stores need, if that comes with the right benefits. So if that comes with having access to a full assortment, for example, better service delivery, that access to credit, as I was saying, or better returns. As long as that helps the business, helps the Kirana store forward, the adaptation of that type of technology at a store level is amazingly quick, I have to say. And with that willingness to change, you see that with digital payments as well. You must have seen the work that, for example, here with Paytm, with Google Pay in India, how quickly that has come up, and you see that the majority of the Kirana stores as well allow you to make these digital payments instead of the traditional cash payments. Also, a development that has gone extremely fast in India. So I would never have the view that the general trade or traditional trade system that is in place in a market like here in India, that there is no willingness or nor speed and adaptation of digital technology. Actually, the willingness to do that, if that becomes available at the right cost and offer all of these benefits, is just amazingly fast.
All right. So our final question would be, can you tell us a bit more about your own trajectory and how you got where you are?
Yes, of course. I started with Unilever quite some time back in the Netherlands as a management trainee back in '99. I enjoyed the company very much from the time that I had before that. I spent some 4 days with a few managers of the company in a workshop. Really loved the type of products and the culture that Unilever had, so started to work there. A few years in the Netherlands, out of Vlaardingen, where I worked for ice cream mainly. Very enjoyable time. Went to Mexico then, originally for a few years, but my wife and I went there and we stayed finally for 12 years in Mexico, different roles in the supply chain, in manufacturing and distribution, in customer service, in planning. A fantastic time there in Mexico. I ran the supply chain finally there for Mexico and the Caribbean. Really loved the time in Mexico, and my 3 daughters were actually born there in Mexico as well. After that, I had a good time for working for home care, first for Latin America, and then for the division that we have. Unilever has 3 divisions: beauty and personal care, home care, and foods and refreshments. I worked for home care then out of London, and then the last 2 years I've been based here. Out of Mumbai in India, first for the supply chain for South Asia, and as a managing director here for HUL, and lately I manage the supply chain for Southeast Asia and Australia as well.
What are some of the differences that you see between these markets, and how do you see those developing in the future? So I'm talking about emerging markets in particular. Yes.
So the differences between emerging markets, I think if you look at it trade-wise, of course, there are the obvious differences where the channels are different in proportion, different in size. You see the size of stores, for example, even if you look at a general trade, is different in Mexico than it would be here in India. So there's the obvious differences. But I think particularly for India, the competitiveness that you have in the landscape here of the general trade, of the Kirana stores, is of a very different level than I've seen in many other developing markets where you have these type of stores as well. And that comes really with the speed of change that the stores are willing to adopt. Now, we spoke a lot here about digital technology, but if you look at the type of service delivery that we spoke about, how these stores have adapted to actually giving you that personal connect, and the house delivery, the home delivery, for example, the ability that they have to understand better what consumers in their neighborhood are looking for, and making sure that they have that in their assortment. So that assortment management, for example, that adaptability is really fantastic to see here. And therefore, you see as well that the general trade channel is really a channel that is not a channel that won't be here in the future. It's a still ever growing channel, and of course, you have e-com growing faster than as we see that in many of the markets. But I do believe that the general trade channel, particularly the Kirana stores in India, will be here for the long run because of the speed of adaptability and their willingness to change to an ever-changing and fast-changing market here.
All right. Thank you, Willem. It's been really fantastic to hear and to learn from your experiences. We really appreciate you taking the time and having the flexibility.
Great talking with you. Thanks a lot.
Very good. So we just had an amazing conversation with Willem Uijen, in which, he described the complexity of India, with this fast-changing environment. And for instance, in 2016, a ban on the 2 largest currency notes, the huge shock on cash usage, was announced, likely disrupting many billion transactions and pushing forward digital payments. So Willem talk about how quickly the reality for retailers is changing. So Professor, how would you advise manufacturers, particularly fast-moving consumer good manufacturers, to react to this ever-changing environment in terms of developing those capabilities of that brings flexibility, to the supply chain?
Yes, right. It was really fascinating, right? Also, if you heard him talk about the 8 million stores that Unilever is reaching, of which they serve 2 million directly. And still, the 8 million is not the full number, right? The full number is like 14 million or so in India.
Yeah,
so
like 12,
really,
I think.
It's really fascinating, right? To see this. Yes, and also the rate of change in India is probably much faster than what we see in other markets. So in a sense, the developments in the Indian market can also be an informant of what may happen in other markets, right? I don't know. So if you think of this rapid change, I would say for companies the main thing is to experiment, to actively experiment and try out new things. And in research, we call this randomized controlled trials, right? So implying we just select maybe a few hundred stores to try out particular new innovation, and then compare them in a scientifically sound manner to a similar group of stores, and then see if the desired effect takes place. And this active experimentation, I think this is what sets really the successful suppliers apart from the ones that are maybe just followers. What do you think? I think Rafa has also been trying to do some things around RCTs, right? Trying to set things up.
Yeah, and usually it's not such a simple process, right? It usually takes a lot of convincing on the company side, which is understandable in a sense, but at least from my perspective, it would be awesome if companies were willing to engage more and more in this type of scenarios, which in the end, can be relatively cheap for a company and can give insights that could potentially really transform the business going forward, right?
I think that's true, but at the same time, you say, well, it takes an effort. I think it sometimes takes an effort, right? But I think it's also impressive if you see some companies actively doing experimentation and really trying out things, right? So, for instance, if you look at what AB InBev did in Latin America when the COVID started, and essentially they just set up an omni-channel portal within weeks, just trying it and see how it grows. I think that shows that the entrepreneurial attitude can also exist in these very large companies.
Absolutely. I think where there's a bit of a potential going forward, let's call it like that, is that these companies could do this in a more rigorous way, right? And that's where I think academia can play a huge role in facilitating the development of these, let's say, academically sound RCTs that can inform practice and can be also very informative for theory building purposes.
Yes, for theory building and in the end also for companies to base better decisions on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So to ensure that what you find in the pilot or in the experiment also can be extrapolated to your entire, to your complete set of stores that you're serving. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Professor, now that we're discussing the academic literature, at least from what I've read so far, I see that this literature paints a picture of a country that struggles with digitization. I'm talking, of course, about India. For instance, as a result of informality, low education levels, and low wages. Interestingly, this is contrasting with the perspective that Willem had that suggests that the retail environment in general and nanostores in particular are adapting at a very fast pace, including from the digitization standpoint. And he even mentioned that there were no clear barriers to these efforts. So how do you think we can reconcile these two contrasting experiences? And in your opinion, what is driving this rapid digitization in the grocery retail sector in India?
Yeah, it's a great question and probably also a great puzzle still a bit, right? So we know from our research that actually shopkeepers are very open to digitize if they do see the clear benefits. And I think this was also something that Willem very much stressed. So he says, well, if it enables them to have, for instance, easier access to credit, or ensuring that their shelves are filled when they need them to be filled. So there are very clear operational benefits to the stores that they can actually see on a day-to-day basis. There is a willingness to adopt this technology, even though there could be risks associated with it, right? And a risk that we have identified in our research is a fear of creating too much transparency on the business. I think it's common knowledge that in many countries these stores may not be fully transparent in their income, right? And creating transparency may run, from their perspective, a quote unquote risk of having to disclose this to the tax authorities or to others. But our research essentially argues and also demonstrates that if the benefits are clear, shopkeepers are willing to give up this lack of transparency, and as a consequence, this also implies that societally there are benefits, right? Because in the long run, it's important these stores become part of the formal economy. So why India? I think Camilo you just mentioned this big incident when the big banknotes were suddenly declared void, right? Essentially a few years ago, and this gave a big spur to digital payments. So this was a shock in a sense. By the way, very interesting shock, I think, to investigate from a research perspective whether it actually was a driver. But I do think in the end, digital payments, this is where the movement is happening. So once the payments become digital, then I think other elements will also move there. We see this in East Africa, where digital payments have been common for quite a while, but still a challenge there are the transaction costs. We see it now in Argentina with Mercado Pago really providing solutions to shopkeepers. So I think the digital payment is probably where the movement is. And in India with Paytm, with Google Pay, with quite a few other solutions that have grown really fast. I would say if the consumer starts to pay digital, the stores will just follow and jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, so it's not just like from the manufacturers or from entrepreneurs that are creating like new ventures, like new companies, trying to leverage nanostores, but also this pressure from consumers that are demanding, those services and other.
It's a pressure from consumers, but it's also so of course it's pressure from consumers because then you have to offer the service. But I would also say you can also reverse it in a sense. So in this supply chain, for instance, the handling of the physical cash is a challenge, right? It's a challenge to handle the physical cash. Now, suppose I'm Unilever, I'm supplying these stores, and I would like to accept digital payment from the stores to me. For the stores, this may not be very attractive if the consumers to the stores still pay in cash, because at that point the stores essentially get the cash get piled up there, and they somehow need to take care of the conversion of this physical cash to digital cash or digital wallets. So I think the two are really closely connected in a sense. So in a sense, consumers switching to digital payments are a key enabler to digitization of other elements in the supply chain as well.
Yes, indeed, Professor. And concerning the landscape, Willem mentioned during the interview that India's grocery retail sector is mainly characterized or composed by wholesaler-like players and millions of nanostores, of micro retailers. Should we expect in the long run that the gap between the two, let's say, modern and traditional channel closes, and that the modern channel becomes more like the traditional channel, or that the traditional channel becomes more like the modern channel? Because what we've seen, and we have evidence from research, is that modern channels are creating new formats, new small shops, discount stores that operationally looks more similar to the traditional channel.
Yeah. Could be. So I think where the challenge is for the modern channel is actually in the resilience and in the enormous adaptability of the traditional channel of these 12 million Kirana stores in India. And I think Willem also stressed this a lot. And the way in which they are able to change their business model. I was amazed by the number that he said that currently about 50% of the nanostores in India, it was 50% of the sales of the nanostores in India to their consumers are generated by home delivery. This is very hard to compete with for any other player, right? Just because of the cost base. And we know from analysis that was done by BCG a few years ago that the cost base of the Kirana stores is much lower due to a variety of reasons, real estate, labor costs, etc. If you just look at that, they are cheaper. They have lower operating costs. So it's hard to compete there. Where I would see the winners in terms of the modern channel are the companies that actually look at the nanostores as partners and somehow integrate them in their network, like Reliance is trying to do in India, like Amazon are doing. So Amazon, when Amazon entered in India, they were trying to compete with the nanostores. Right now, Amazon's main strategy is actually to see where they can partner with the nanostores and actually leverage this network. And for that, I think we'll see a variety of business models emerge depending on density in particular, right? Willem also explained in the top cities and in tier 1 cities, very high density of stores. This will lead to a different. This already is a different business model for them now because they go direct rather than using wholesalers or cash and carry. But I think that's also where we will see differentiation compared to let's say the countryside, where remember in India, still urbanization is relatively low, right? It's below 50%. So there's still a lot of these stores are in the countryside and the dynamics are really different.
Professor, you now touched on how big players like Walmart, for instance, through a deal with Flipkart, Amazon through the I Have Space program, Facebook through the partnership with Reliance Retail, or Google through Google Pay, are disrupting the status quo in the grocery retail market in India. How do you expect these developments to unfold going forward? And what are some interesting research questions that emerge as a result of this huge intervention that is taking place?
So first of all, it implies there's a huge amount of very cheap capital being invested, right? And this, looking at this as an academic, right? This is a great way to try out tons of different new ideas without any pressure for immediate success, right? So we will see many new ideas being entered, and almost as many new of these ideas also fail. But a few of them would be very successful. Which ones? Yeah, that's where the jury is still out, right? But I think what our research so far has shown in terms of the success of new initiatives is that initiatives are successful when they really create value to the supply chain, to the operations in the supply chain, in the sense that they do provide benefits for the operation in the shopkeeper, or they do provide benefits for the consumer shopping there and are really creating value rather than extracting value. I think solutions that have tried to extract value from the supply chain and maybe shift power, they have been less successful because these shopkeepers are smart, right? Why would they engage there? Where's the research? I don't know. What do you think, Rafa? You have some ideas?
Well, I think just seeing what the impact of all these different initiatives is on the operations of the store. So, for instance, if you think about Amazon with the I Have Space, essentially what that does, it creates additional revenue sources for the store, which is starting to provide new services for the community. So I can imagine there that it's essentially more cash going for the shopkeepers and a better occupation of their time, in a sense that they can then put to use within the local communities. Probably it also allows them to create connections that would, draw traffic to their store, right?
Yes.
Whereas in the case
I think that also relates to let's say where Camila was alluding to. If you look at the growth of convenience stores in many markets, what we know, for instance, of OXXO and of OXXO in Mexico or Family Mart in Asia, is the reason that they are successful is primarily because of the services that they offer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, and actually the goods that they sell are in a sense only secondary. Right, so the services are critical, and I think the Amazon example that you're mentioning, Rafa, this actually provides an opportunity for shopkeepers to add a service, through which they are then able to also leverage the sales of the goods and connect to their clients. Maybe also I'm now thinking of the comment that Willem made, and which still intrigued me, of the 50% home delivery. I can see enormous economies of scale at the shop level if you do the home delivery of the Amazon deliveries and combine this with delivering your own goods there, right?
Absolutely.
And whether that economies of scale exist, I think this is a very interesting research question. I would love to research this. Any company interested in partnering with us and sharing some data, please feel free to reach out.
Nice advertising, Jan.
Well, I think it's advertising, but also displaying on how we work in our research, in a sense, right? Because we collaborate with many CPG companies and startups that actually do share their data, that help us to create better insights. And also, given the fact that many of these are returning partners, that we do provide value also to our research partners there.
Of course. And now that you say that, is like if you fail, well, probably will give you some ideas of why you failed, and then you can pivot that idea and go back into the market and try again, right? Because that's how entrepreneurship works.
Yes, yes, and it's good to learn from failure, right? And that's also what we try to teach in our course. It's not just the success stories. Actually, it's the failures that help us learn, because it helps us to better understand what could be successful.
Yeah, indeed. Amazing, Professor. So thank you very much for discussing what we learned from Willem and how the grocery retail landscape is changing, shifting in India at a fast pace. And stay tuned for more episodes here at the Emerging Market Retail Podcast. Have a nice one.
Thank you, guys.
This podcast is brought to you by Tilburg University.